Well, I'm still struggling here with my carbon ink issues. And I thought, well, I'll try filling another few pens with carbon ink, which I've done. And I'm writing on different paper. This paper does not work as well as this. And there's a lot of factors that go into why a pen or any art product works well this time and not so well that time. And it might be the paper, it might be the artist, it might be the humidity, it might be the stars in the sky, who knows what it is. But this paper I don't like. This paper I like better. This is very felty. I don't know what paper it was. I think it's printing paper rather than watercolor paper. This is watercolor paper. It seems to be fine. So I used two pens on this. I used my Skyline from yesterday, and I used a pen that I put together, or that I put the ink in today. The pens I'm using for this ink are pens that I can easily take apart. The nib and the feed are friction fit. The section is friction fit into the barrel. There's no, the only thing that can really go wrong with this ink suddenly decided to just thought to itself, I'm going to destroy this pen. The only thing that really can go wrong, I think, would be the sack. And that's a minor inconvenience, we'll say. It's not really. The sack is $1.50, and I can afford that. Maybe. Today I can afford it. So this horse-like object is going to be blue. And I didn't wait very long for the ink to dry, so there might be some bleeding that happens. We'll just see how that works. I still am not a watercolorist I don't study watercolor, so I'm not entirely sure how this is. One of the things that I mentioned yesterday, it's a unicorn. I forgot I added a little horn on him, so let's just add the horn right now. Make that one gold horn. I did talk about the quality of the watercolor by itself or watercolor over ink wash. And ink wash, when you mix media, when I mix media, why do I blame you on my, I'm not blaming you, why do I include you, that's what I meant to say, in my ineptitude. And there's a little bit of bleeding right there. I have these feelings about mixing media, and sometimes I don't mind ink wash or watercolor over pen and ink, but other times it reminds me either of coloring books where you're filling in the lines, or the watercolor is beautiful, really, really beautiful, and all of the pen strokes are like little fish bones in my throat. They sort of stick in there in a weird way, and those are my conceptions of it, my perceptions, I should say. of it rather than, universal. So now there are people, I should actually study those drawings and those paintings. I guess watercolor is considered drawing when you get a book out. Drawings of the masters, they often include watercolor in the mix of things, because I think art historians and curators of museums and stuff, I think they consider watercolor to be drawing, not painting. I don't know if they've changed their tune about that or not, but that used to be how it was seen. And I think part of that may have been that watercolors were sort of seen as sketches, studies for paintings, for quote, real paintings, and they weren't seen as art of their own. But maybe they've changed their mind about that. Or it might be that they categorize them as drawings because they're on paper. I don't know. I suppose I could look it up on the interweb, or probably I've got lots of books, and if I actually read the books rather than just looking at the pictures, I might be able to say these things with assurance and gravitas rather than just opinion. But anyone that watches my videos knows that opinion is what I give. I don't give facts. I would not do well with Sergeant Joe Friday. Just the facts, sir. Well, I had this feeling that the man was going to murder. Just the facts, ma'am. And then his sidekick, whatever his name was, Sergeant Joe Friday, and what was the other guy's name? Joe. Weren't you being a little hard on the little old lady? What was his name? Anyway, just the facts, ma'am. I would not do well with Sergeant Joe Friday. He would be exasperated by my inability to distinguish something important from something trivial, and something factual versus something that had to do with one's feelings. And for being an unfeeling kind of guy normally in my life, I do have feelings. See, now there's bleeding right there. That's not good. There's bleeding down here. But that, again, it's because I didn't wait long enough, and I knew that that might happen. I'm going to make, there, his eye is going to be that color, whatever that color is. Another thing, I'll just, since I'm giving my opinions, I'll continue to do so. My opinions about mixing watercolor and ink is that sometimes the ink, when you're drawing with pen and ink, unless you're doing like this, which is essentially just outlines. If you're drawing with cross-hatching and things like that, you're representing shadows or textures, or but let's just pretend you're discussing shadows. Well, the shadows are not gray. They're made of color. And then, you know, when you go to add the color later, you're sort of stuck with these shadows you've already put in, with these black lines. And I've just ruined this drawing, by the way. I know that, and you know that. So I'll just continue to ruin it. But I shouldn't have added orange inside the body. But now I've done it, so now now I've got this sort of green color right there. I'm like, why did I do that? Add that elsewhere. But anyway, it's just in my mind, when someone adds color on top of cross-hatching, that it just there's confusion in my logical brain. Maybe it looks okay, but in my brain, the logic part of my brain, I wonder what the point was of doing that. So I think when it comes to watercolor, and again, I don't know enough about it because I don't do it, and I admire people that do it, but I don't know how yet, and I don't think I'll learn. I'm too old to learn new tricks, but I think I would be less likely to want to do watercolor over pen and ink. I might do watercolor over very light pencil lines and then erase the pencil lines, or just leave the pencil lines there. That's part of the charm, I think. But I think there's something about the very blackness. I guess that's it. It's the blackness of the lines and the sharpness of the lines and the thinness of the lines that seem to me like all these little tiny fish bones that are caught in my eyeball. And when I'm looking at a watercolor, I want to see the color. I don't want to see the lines. Or I want to see the lines and I don't want to see the color. Just like in this drawing, I don't think I improved by adding the color. And if I were to take the black all away and just have the color, it might actually look more interesting to me. So, in fact, well, since you're still here, why don't I do that? The pen is on one side, the pencil's on the other, so let's just do a very light. I'm going to pretend that I didn't do I'm going to pretend I didn't do this other one, and I'm just going to pretend that I'm just using watercolor. Yes, and pencil. I'm using watercolor and pencil so I can know where I'm supposed to be going. There's another foot here. Okay. This leg on this one, I still don't know how horses work. And I know that horses and dogs, their bones are just like human bones. They've got a thing and a thing and a thing and a thing. And their bones follow. You know, they've got a wrist. And the wrist is just a lot longer than our wrist. And so I think that somehow, you know, it's like they have a third leg bone, not a wrist bone. So if I just remember or think as I'm drawing, you know, this this is the elbow of the horse. This is the knee of the horse. This is the wrist. This is the whatever. Then I wouldn't have a problem. But because I don't remember things like that, I can barely remember how to finish a sentence that I start, because the beginning of my sentence was back in time, and I don't know what I'm doing. You can see that, don't you? Here I'm drawing this the same way that I oil paint. I'm sort of mixing my colors on the canvas, and they're going to turn muddy in a minute. I should learn to, that's what all these little holes are for, Pierre, all these little trays. You're supposed to select your tonalities and put them in and kind of mix them up. And then, once you have the color you want, then you move them to the surface of the thing you're doing. Why am I adding orange here? Orange is supposed to be the background color. Well, not in this case. Okay, so let me just continue with this. Let's say, okay, what's the difference between these two things? Well, this is anemic compared to this. This has all these dark, sharp lines. So what I need to do is add some dark to my unicorn. Oh, I forgot the tail. I mean the corn, the una part of it. And of course, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me, help me out, people. Well, anyway. Among my favorite watercolorists are John Singer Sargent's and Winslow Homer. But then I have a thing for Albrecht Dürer's watercolors too, which almost look like oil paint because they're so carefully drawn. It looks like there's layers and layers and layers of paint that go into it, but they're just watercolors. Okay, well, anyway, so we've got these two horses, unicorns, and I think I prefer this to that in terms of, this just looks like a colored ink drawing to me. I don't know. And this looks like a inept watercolor to me. And I'm not making it any better. Oh well. Thank you.